the truth, they will ridicule everything you say and do. It's all part of a deception. It's a puppet master's tool. And I've seen those craft shut down the silos from 10 miles away. And there ain't nothing that the Pentagon can do. They can't make them go away.
From Malmstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. Night Dreams Talk Radio Network brings you the World Paranormal News with James Creechbaum. Now, the latest news.
I'm James Creechbaum with the Paranormal and Earth News, and every human should be alarmed by plastic crisis in our oceans. Without change, warns a bipartisan group of senators, there will be more plastic by weight than fish in the oceans by 2050. Some of the signs of this growing crisis are visible. Sea turtles caught in discarded fishing nets, piles of trash floating in the ocean, birds and fish stranded in plastic six-pack rings. But much of the trash in the ocean is not so obvious. National Geographic reports that the iconic Great Pacific Garbage Patch, also known as the Pacific Trash Vortex, is really more of a soup of small plastic particles the sun has broken down. Punctuated by larger items such as fishing nets and shoes, much of the trash is dumped into the sea from ships, but most come from land, bottles, cups, bags. The sun breaks down these items, but they do not really biodegrade. Instead, they enter animals' bodies, killing the animals immediately or entering marine food chains. These microplastics also block sunlight from supporting plankton and other backbone ecosystems species. Ocean currents transport trash from shore to the middle of the ocean, but the problem is by no means distant and isolated. Researchers announced in June that they had found microplastic particles off California's Monterey Bay, and not just on the surface. The researchers found microplastics in surprising abundance in the middle of the water column. Anyone who cares about the marine ecosystem, and that ought to include every human, should be alarmed. Now, Harvard physicist talking about the 5G. No safe way to implement 5G. 5G technology is the holy grail of technocrats who desperately want to enable a command and control network of the LOT devices to control human populations en masse. Thus, safety research and toxic effects is being aggressively suppressed, says the editor. According to the telecom industry, 5G, the fifth-generation wireless network, is required to give people the wireless freedom they crave and need. Described by the HP as blazingly fast, 5G, which is 70 times faster than its predecessor, 4G, will replace cable internet for good, allowing you to download a 2-hour high-definition movie in 3 seconds flat. 5G is also being touted as necessary to enable the development and proliferation of self-driving cars and other future technologies. However, as noted in the May 2019 Forbes article, robocar designers are not, in fact, relying on 5G for their development, and the cars themselves do not actually need that kind of bandwidth to perform the required functions. Now, while blazingly fast 5G might sound attractive to many who have grown up in the internet era, there are significant health and environmental concerns relating to 5G radiation that are not being properly addressed, which may have profound implications both in the short and the long term. If increased internet speed and reliability are the end goal, then fiber optic connections would be a far better and safer way to go forward. Indeed, we need more wired connections and fewer wireless ones as it is. With 5G, microwave radiation exposures will be so massively increased, there's no doubt in my mind that mankind will eventually end up regretting its short-givingness. That is a whole lot to think about right there. Now, it's talking about a couple of fishermen. Here's a couple of fishermen in Brazil. A UFO landed a strange landing mark and left strange landing marks. These two fishermen, it says their names Bezerra and Olivia, were gathering their nets when they saw a bright UFO land just a few meters away. They thought it was a balloon at first, but when the speed of the object convinced them that they were faced with something otherworldly, well, according to the terrified witnesses, the UFO landed on the island right across from them in Sao Paulo. Now, the UFO left marks on the ground and traces of radiation. Now, Fernando said when the light was over our heads, it changed direction and went to a small island where it landed. And on the lower part of the UFO, there was a number of spinning lights. Olivia added, "I almost died of fear. I hid in the bottom of the boat." Now, the UFO had yellowish hue and was so intense, the two frightened fishermen tried to flee, but bizarrely, they say that their boat's engine stopped and the object passed over. Now, Fernando did say, "We made about 10 attempts until the engine started, and then we left as fast as we could. We could see that the UFO had landed on a small island located between us and the mangroves across the river."
Coming to you from some far point station, like a cosmic tumbleweed, both north and south of the Pleiades. Here's your host, Gary Anderson.
And here I am.
Hello, this is Tom Witmore.
Hi, Tom. This is Gary at Night Dreams Talk Radio. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, not bad. Not bad at all. I'm pretty well rested up today.
Well,
How are you?
Well, you're sounding a lot better than you did earlier today, I can say that.
Oh, great. Do I sound all right? I'm on an earpiece.
Yeah, you sound pretty good. I mean, your signal's good. You're not echoing or all that. So,
Okay.
Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been interested in the UFO field going way back. Gary, I was born in 1953, and that was right around the time that the great movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, came into the public. And I'm a Cold War baby, a baby boomer. And I grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s. My dad was, he was a jet pilot for a defense contractor. And, I grew up with the science fiction of the day, the Twilight Zone, and like I mentioned, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and movies like that, and science fiction related to space and everything. And one day I saw a book on a friend of mine's bookshelf. It was Flying Saucers, Top Secret by Donald Kehoe. And I got interested in reading it, and I started reading Donald Kehoe books. And back in those days, in the 50s and 60s, up to the time of the Condon Report, UFOs were fairly big in the mainstream media. I wouldn't say they're real big, but they were reported. And you had certain incidents that occurred during that time, such as the Betty and Barney Hill incident and other things. So, I was cognizant, I was aware of the UFO problem up until the 70s. I started going to college and all that. Well, then in the 80s, I had not been active in the field, hadn't even been reading books, but I happened to turn on the TV one day and I saw this program on the television. It's called UFO Cover-Up Live. And they were discussing a lot of the kinds of rumors that became prevalent in the UFO community at that time. And then I was walking down the street one day and I saw a UFO magazine and I bought it and started reading it. And then I started learning more about what was going on in the field, and I started reading UFO books. Well, pretty soon I figured out that MUFON was run right out of Seguin, Texas, which is just a few miles from San Antonio. And I joined the local MUFON group, and I got a copy of the Field Investigator's Manual and studied that and passed the Field Investigator's exam and started looking into cases. I eventually became the state section director. Well, about that time, Robert Bigelow, who's a big name in the field, of course, got involved with the three main UFO groups, which were the Fund for UFO Research, CUFOS, and MUFON. And Bigelow was getting into funding UFO research, pretty intensely. And Walt Andrus asked me to administer some of the funds involved in that, and then eventually I was asked to join the board in 1995 at the Austin symposium. So I went onto the board on MUFON then, and I've been on ever since, and here I am.
Oh, wow. So how many reports does MUFON, the local one in your state, versus how many do they get worldwide or countrywide, or how many do they get of credible reports a year?
Well, and I'm going to quote Jan Harzan, the executive director of MUFON. I don't want to act like I know more than I do, but he was recently on another radio talk show, and we typically take in 500 to 1,000 reports a month, and that's worldwide, but that's a lot. Okay, that's upwards of 10 to 12,000 reports a year. And MUFON has over 100,000 reports in its database.
Oh, wow.
Now, that doesn't mean that every report is flying saucers or spacemen, from other planets. Jan himself mentioned that about 30 to 34% typically of the reports we get are identified, and about 5%, 3 to 5% are hoaxes. And then some of the cases turn out to be insufficient data. We just don't have enough information, to either identify it or not, or leave it unidentified. And some we take as information only because they don't really fit the profile of a UFO report. But the unknowns, that's going to vary. But historically, and like Dr. J. Allen Hynek found, you're going to get around, if you get enough case sightings, you're going to end up with about a core of about 5% that are really interesting unknowns.
So can you take us, like when you investigate, when you take in a report from somebody, how do you take it in? Is it over the phone, or do they go on the internet, or how do they report their encounter, and how do you follow up on a report?
Well, we have a system, and we have a computerized system where people can go on the MUFON website and report a case. Also, the local groups, the state sections, may be well known enough that the state section director gets calls and reports that way. And you have state directors and so on and so forth. So information fills in, it filters in from various sources. And but we have what is called a Field Investigator's Manual. And it's very, it's very